This is your Classical Break, your daily dose of classical music. I'm Tyler Alderson, and today we'll be listening to Arcangelo Corelli's Fourth Concerto Grosso, part of a collection of 12 that have become both extremely well-known and very influential. Corelli is one of those guys that we know very little about in his formative years. There are all kinds of stories about how he started playing the violin, and also a lot of genealogies linking him to various noble and aristocratic families. We do know that his family was well off, but not noble. And he ended up in Bologna for a period of time. There are more anecdotes about him traveling around Europe, including one where he's chased out of Paris by a jealous rival composer. Again, like most good stories, this one and a lot of them about Corelli don't really seem to be true. But however it happened, Corelli moved to Rome and he became a fixture of the music scene there. Copies of his music were distributed not only around the city but around the continent, and Corelli died a very wealthy man. He was also in demand as a violinist, and he's known as a pioneer of both playing and writing for the violin. Many of his violin students also became composers, and he's credited with a huge influence over the development of Italian violin music in general. And what's funny is that even though his writing for violin was highly regarded, it wasn't all that virtuosic. He didn't stretch the boundaries of the violin significantly. There's a famous story of when he was playing at the premiere of a Handel oratorio. Handel had just written a part for the violin that went really high, higher than Corelli liked, and he just refused to play it. So instead of stretching the technical boundaries, Corelli focused on playing in a lyrical, expressive style, trying to use his music to evoke an emotional reaction rather than wow people with that technical prowess. You'll hear it in the violin writing of this piece. There are plenty of fast passages, but there's not necessarily a lot of flying around the fingerboard. There are, though, some beautiful lines. This collection of 12 concertos was only published in 1714, which was a year after Corelli's death. But many of them had been circling around long before that. Composers like Vivaldi, Handel, and Bach all drew heavily on these as a model for their own music, and elements of Corelli's style can be heard all over the music of the Baroque era. One unique aspect of this piece is the structure. It's in 4 movements: fast, slow, a dance movement, and then fast again. And that's the basic pattern that came to be used for symphonies and concertos and string quartets, all kinds of pieces, really. But that came over 50 years after Corelli's death. The difference between this piece and the later symphonies and concertos and all that, structured this way, is that the movements in general aren't connected too much thematically. In fact, they could very well have been composed separately and then arranged into this concerto. But the overall structure is one that would become more and more popular, eventually dominating much of classical music, and Corelli was certainly popular enough himself to take at least a bit of credit for spreading it. Here's the Archi di Roma with Corelli's Fourth Concerto Grosso. One of the things I love about listening to Corelli, besides the fact that he's a great composer, is that he's such an influential composer. When you're listening to him, you're listening to Handel and Bach and Vivaldi and all the great composers that took their inspiration from him. And so many elements of his style ended up in those composers' music, especially in their concertos. Thanks to the Archi di Roma for putting that up online, and thank you for listening. If you have the chance, please rate and review this podcast wherever it is that you're getting it. I'm Tyler Alderson, and tomorrow for your classical break, we're going to be listening to a very different piece, Alban Berg's First Piano Sonata. I'll see you then.